Story 1. The Mile Marker Repeater. The odometer ticked from mile marker 247 to 247 again. I watched it happen, watched the numbers roll backward on a straight stretch of highway where no amount of terrain made sense. My name is Robert Hayes, and I've been driving the I-80 through Nebraska for 23 years. And I know every mile of this road like it's written on the inside of my skull. I'd passed 247 5 minutes ago. The next marker should have been 248. It wasn't. I'd picked up the hitchhiker at the truck stop near Grand Island around 11 in the evening, March 14th, 2023. He was lean in that way that suggested he hadn't eaten real food in weeks, with eyes that held a peculiar quality I couldn't quite name. Not red-rimmed or wild, just empty in a way that made the back of my neck prickle. He said his name was David. He didn't have a destination, just needed to get west. I told him I'd take him to Laramie, and he'd nodded like that was exactly what he expected me to say. The cab of my Peterbilt smelled like stale coffee, and the air freshener shaped like a pine tree that had stopped smelling like pine around 1997. I kept the CB chatter at a murmur, something about black ice near Rawlins, a good food stop at mile marker 312. David sat in the passenger seat with his hands folded in his lap, not looking at the road or at me, just staring at a point somewhere in the darkness beyond the windshield. I tried making small talk for the first 40 minutes. He didn't engage, didn't so much as crack his neck to look at me. Around midnight, I gave up and drove in silence. The highway stretched out in front of me like a river of asphalt, the lane markers hypnotic under the headlights. We were making good time, cruising at 65, the engine running smooth. The desert air was cold and thin, the kind of cold that seeps through insulation and makes your bones ache. I was thinking about stopping at mile marker 290 to grab coffee, maybe stretch my legs, when David suddenly turned his head toward me. "You should take the exit," he said. His voice was strange, not exactly wrong, but like it was coming from inside my own head, like I was remembering him speaking rather than hearing him in real time. At mile marker 251. "That's not an exit, I know," I said. "Nothing out there but ranch land. You should take it anyway." I didn't respond. Something was clawing at the edge of my awareness, a wrongness I couldn't articulate. I watched the mile markers ticking forward. 248, 249, 250, and then 251 appeared, and there it was. A dirt road leading north off the highway, marked with a reflective sign I'd somehow never noticed in 23 years of driving this same route. My hands moved the steering wheel. I didn't consciously decide to turn, I just found myself taking the exit, pulling the rig onto the access road. The asphalt disappeared behind us, and the dirt road stretched forward under my wheels. "What the hell are we doing?" I demanded. David didn't answer. He was looking at his hands, turning them over slowly like he was seeing them for the first time. The road was perfectly smooth despite being unpaved, no washboard, no rocks. My headlights cut through a darkness that felt thicker than normal darkness, the kind that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. We drove for what felt like hours but couldn't have been more than 10 minutes. My odometer was behaving strangely, flickering between readings. "Stop here," David said. I stopped. The engine idled. Ahead of us was nothing but darkness and the faint outline of what might have been a structure. I put the rig in park and set the air brake. "Why?" I asked. "Because we're here," David said, "because this is where it happens." He opened the passenger door and stepped down from the cab. Against every instinct screaming at me to lock the doors and drive, I found myself cutting the engine. The silence that followed was absolute. No wind, no distant highway noise, just the settling creaks of the truck cooling. I climbed down after him, and my boots hit the dirt with a sound that seemed too loud. The structure became clearer as my eyes adjusted. It was a building, brutalist and wrong, all concrete angles and windows dark as teeth. There were no vehicles, no sign of habitation, but there was a door standing open, and from it emanated a cold that had nothing to do with the March air. "I don't want to do this," I said. "You have to," David replied. He was walking toward the door. "Every 7 years, the loop resets. Every 7 years, I have to bring a driver here. Every 7 years, someone new gets picked up at mile marker 247, and we drive out to the facility, and then it starts again." "The loop? What loop?" But even as I asked, something was crystallizing in my mind. The way the mile marker had repeated. The way I'd felt compelled to take the exit. The terrible sense of having lived this exact moment before countless times. David reached the door. He turned back to look at me, and I saw that his eyes weren't empty anymore. They were drowning in a kind of ancient despair. "Last time," he said, "I was the one driving. Before that, I was picked up. I've been here so many times that I can't remember being anywhere else." He stepped through the door. "Come on. The sooner you see what's inside, the sooner it starts. And the sooner it starts, the closer we get to the end." "There is no end," I whispered. I didn't know how I knew that, but I did. "Exactly," David said. And something in the darkness beyond that door moved. I woke up on I-80 mile marker 247 with David sitting in my passenger seat, his hands folded in his lap. My CB was murmuring something about black ice near Rawlins, a good food stop at mile marker 312. The hitchhiker's name was David. He didn't have a destination, just needed to get west. "You should take the exit," he said, "at mile marker 251. My hands moved the steering wheel. I was screaming, but no sound emerged from my throat. The mile marker read 247 again as I turned onto the exit road, and I understood with a clarity that shattered something fundamental in my consciousness that I would take this exit for the rest of eternity. That 7 years from now, or 7 years after that, or 7 years after that, David and I would be different people. But we would still be here, still driving, still turning at 251, still walking toward that door. The darkness inside the facility moved again. I'm still there, counting the seconds between loops. I don't remember my daughter's face anymore. I don't remember if I ever had a daughter. What I remember is mile marker 247 and the way David's hands feel when I finally gather the courage to grab them before he reaches the door, and the understanding that whoever or whatever is moving in that darkness isn't just waiting for us. It's been hunting for us since before I picked up David at the truck stop. It's been hunting for all of us. It's been so very, very hungry for so very, very long. Story 2. The Reflection Protocol. The mirror in the sleeper cab was showing me a different highway than the one I was actually driving. I became aware of this fact while adjusting it at a rest stop near Lexington, Kentucky at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday that would never quite become Wednesday. My name is Patricia Sullivan, and I pride myself on meticulous vehicle maintenance, so when I noticed the discrepancy, it didn't feel like a hallucination. It felt like a malfunction. The mirror hung from the cab roof in its usual position. In it, I could see the road behind my rig clearly. I could see mile marker 94 in the reflection, and beyond it a stretch of Kentucky farmland under what appeared to be a clear night sky. But when I turned to look directly behind the truck through the rear window, I saw mile marker 97 in a town with lights, and the sky was obscured by low clouds. I turned back to the mirror. Still 94. Still clear sky. Still farmland. I've been driving heavy haul for 18 years. I've seen plenty of weird things. Deer frozen on highways, other drivers who seem to be ghosts. That thing that happened in New Mexico in 2019 that I never spoke about to anyone. But I'm not easily rattled, and I'm certainly not given to panic. I checked the mirror's mounting hardware. Everything was secure. I cleaned the glass with paper towels and coffee. The discrepancy remained. I got back in the cab and sat in the driver's seat. The sleeper cab behind me was dark, lit only by the ambient light from the truck stop. I'd been awake for 17 hours, which was bad. I needed to sleep. But the mirror had activated something in my brain that was now running at full throttle. What if it wasn't a malfunction? What if the mirror was showing me something real? I started the engine and pulled back onto I-75 heading north. The road was nearly empty at this hour, just me and the occasional car, the occasional 18-wheeler doing the same job I was. I kept my eyes on the mirror. The reflection showed the same farmland, the same clear sky, the same mile marker 94. But as I drove forward, the numbers on my odometer advanced, 94 to 95, 95 to 96, while the mirror continued showing 94. The discrepancy grew. I was driving forward while the reflection stayed still. After 20 minutes of watching this impossible phenomenon, I realized something that sent an ice-cold spike through my chest. The mirror wasn't showing me the road behind my truck. It was showing me the road I wasn't taking. I pulled into the next rest stop, which appeared at mile marker 97, right on schedule according to the forward view, but completely absent from the mirror. I sat in the cab with the engine off and tried to process what I was experiencing. The mirror showed a road that, if I believed it, diverged from the highway I was on at mile marker 94. It showed a different reality, a different version of the highway. That's when I noticed the second mirror. I turned slowly in my seat. There was another mirror hanging from the opposite side of the cab, a mirror I did not remember installing. This one showed a third version of the road, a highway at night, but under an orange sky, with cars that seemed to be driving in slow motion, and mile marker 91. A mile marker I'd passed an hour ago. My breath came in short, rapid bursts. I turned back to the original mirror. Now it showed mile marker 92. The farmland had changed. The fences were gone and the fields had turned to dust. Clear sky had given way to what looked like a sandstorm somewhere between the horizon and the clouds. I got out of the cab. I stood in the rest stop's fluorescent lighting and looked at the truck as if seeing it for the first time. The mirrors reflected the rest stop, reflected my shocked face, reflected the other vehicles parked nearby. Everything normal, everything correct. But when I climbed back into the cab, 5 mirrors now, each one showing a different version of I-75. One showed mile marker 88. One showed mile marker 101. One showed a highway that curved impossibly upward, the lanes climbing toward a sky that was the color of rotten teeth. One showed a version where my truck was driving in the wrong direction, heading south on a northbound highway. The final mirror showed mile marker 94, and standing on the shoulder of the road in its reflection was me, watching my truck drive away. I was sobbing now, though I didn't remember when I started. I turned on the engine. I pulled back onto the highway. I didn't know which version of I-75 I was actually driving on. The speedometer read 65, but were those real miles? The mile marker said 98, but in the mirrors I could see 94, 101, 88, 91, and something called mile marker O written in a symbol that hurt to look at directly. The radio turned on by itself. Through the static came a voice that might have been my own voice, aged 50 years, saying, "If you keep driving forward, you'll reach the junction. If you take the left branch, you'll arrive in Knoxville. The other branches..." Static drowned out the rest. I got back off at the next exit. There was no exit. I was still on the highway. The mirrors now numbered 12. Each one showed a different mile marker, different weather, different versions of my truck driving through different versions of Kentucky. One showed my truck crashed into a median barrier. One showed it burning. One showed me driving it directly into a cornfield. One showed a version where I was in the passenger seat, driving myself crazy, watching my other selves drive past on different versions of the road. The realization struck like lightning. This was the protocol. This was how it worked. They'd put the mirrors in, and once you saw them, you couldn't unsee them. Once you understood that the highway split into infinite branches based on every possible decision, every possible outcome, you became aware of every version simultaneously. You could see all the choices you didn't make, all the versions of yourself you could have been, all playing out in reflection. I was still heading north, or I thought I was. One mirror showed me heading backward. One showed me standing still while the road moved beneath me. One showed me driving straight up into the clouds on a version of I-75 where gravity had forgotten Kentucky. That's when I understood the second part of the protocol. Once you're aware of the branches, you begin to fracture. Your consciousness spreads thin across all the mirrors, watching all the versions of yourself, unable to focus on just one reality. The mirrors multiplied. I counted 47 before I stopped counting. And in each one I was driving forward and also crashed and also stationary and also reversing and also flying and also falling and also dying and also somehow not dying. I don't know which mirror I'm looking out from now. I keep driving on I-75 and I keep watching all the versions of myself drive past in the reflective glass. Sometimes I think one of me is driving correctly, heading toward Knoxville or wherever the end is supposed to be. Sometimes I watch a version of me trying to smash the mirrors. That version never makes it far. I can see myself pulling the truck over, reaching up to destroy the glass, and then all the other versions of me grabbing those wrists, holding them still, showing me what I'll see if I shatter the mirrors. I don't want to know what's behind the reflections. Some nights I count. One mirror showing mile marker 97, one showing 94, one showing 88, one showing a number that isn't a number but a concept that means the place you can never leave. And then there are too many to count, too many to track, infinite mirrors showing infinite versions of Patricia Sullivan driving the same stretch of highway forever, watching herself in all the reflections, trying to remember which one is the real drive and which ones are just mirrors of mirrors of mirrors of... The highway doesn't end. I've learned that much. It just keeps branching. Story 3. The voice in the static. The transmission on my rig started going south around mile marker 156 on US Route 50 through Nevada, September 8, 2024. And the first thing I noticed was that the static on the CB radio started sounding less random and more intentional. My name is Marcus Chen, and I've been listening to CB chatter for 22 years. I know the difference between noise and signal, between entropy and pattern. This was pattern. I was hauling automotive parts from Sacramento to Las Vegas, a run I'd made maybe 40 times. Lonely highway, long stretches of empty desert. The Peterbilt was running solid despite being 11 years old. But I'd been planning to get the transmission serviced in Vegas anyway. I was crossing what locals call the Nevada table when the static resolved into something almost like words. At first I thought maybe a radio signal was bleeding through the CB frequency. Radio stations from nearby towns sometimes did that, particularly late at night, particularly when conditions were strange. But this voice, if you could call it a voice, it was more like the concept of a voice rendered in white noise, was coming through my headset directly as if being transmitted on the exact frequency I was listening on, with the exact modulation to bypass any filtering. "Can you hear me?" the voice said. Just those 4 words, repeated 3 times like a test transmission. "Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?" I turned the volume down. The voice got clearer. I turned it up. The voice got clearer still. There was no volume at which it became easier to ignore. I tried switching channels, but the voice followed, occupying the new frequency with the same insistent question. "This is Marcus in a Peterbilt mile marker 156. Yeah, I hear you. Who's transmitting?" No response, just static. Then, "Can you hear me?" Again. I was beginning to feel the first edges of genuine unease. The Nevada table stretched out endlessly in my headlights, mostly straight, mostly flat, no sign of civilization in any direction. The next truck stop wasn't until mile marker 189. I tried the CB again, calling out for other drivers, asking if anyone else was hearing this frequency. Nothing but the static in that voice asking over and over if I could hear. Around mile marker 162, the voice changed. Instead of asking if I could hear, it started saying my name. Marcus, Marcus, Marcus. Over and over in that same static texture, that same absence of humanity. I grabbed the CB mic to respond and my mouth opened, but what came out wasn't my voice. What came out was the same static voice saying, Marcus, Marcus, Marcus. I dropped the mic like it was on fire. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. The rig drifted slightly left before I corrected it. Nobody does that with CB voices. That's not how radios work. I pulled the headset off my ears and threw it into the passenger seat. Without the headset, I could faintly hear the same voice coming through the dashboard CB speaker. This is not possible, I said aloud, as if saying it would make it true. This is not possible. It's very possible, the voice responded, now coming from the speaker with perfect clarity. I've been possible for a long time, Marcus. I've been riding with you since Sacramento. I was in the cab when you did your pre-trip inspection. I was in the air when you breathed. I was part of the static that's always in every frequency, and now you've started listening clearly enough to hear me. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might crack ribs. What do you want? I want to tell you something, the voice said. I want to tell you what I've seen. I've been in the static for so long, Marcus. I've been in every CB frequency, every radio station, every signal passed through the air. I've been listening to everything, and what I've heard is beautiful and terrible, and I'm so tired of keeping it inside. The mile markers ticked past. 165, 166, 167. The road was completely empty. No other vehicles, no lights on the horizon, just me and the voice and the endless black desert. I've heard drivers confess to murders, the voice continued. I've heard mothers tell their children good night over the phone while someone else listened in the static. I've heard prayers and curses and songs and final words spoken into radios that picked them up and held them forever. I've heard secrets that would destroy people if anyone knew. I've heard love confessions and death wishes in the exact moment when someone decided to hurt themselves. Shut up, I said. My voice sounded small and pathetic against the enormity of the dark highway. I'm going to tell you what I've heard about you, Marcus. I'm going to tell you the secrets you've been keeping, the things you've never said to anyone, and then I think we'll see what happens to someone who's been listened to so thoroughly by something that exists in the space between all the sounds. And it started. The voice began listing things only I would know. Small things at first. How I'd lied to my wife about the routes I was actually taking, where I'd been spending nights, why the money was tight. Bigger things, darker things, things from my past that I thought I'd buried. The voice in the static knew about the accident in 2004 that I'd never reported. It knew about the girl I'd almost hit but did hit and didn't go back to check. It knew about the choice I made to keep driving instead of calling an ambulance, the way I'd rationalized it, the way the guilt had transformed into something else over the years. Not regret, but a kind of acceptance that I was the kind of person who would do that. I was crying, hands on the steering wheel, driving 65 mph through the Nevada table, while a voice made of static and malice whispered all my sins into my ear. Stop! I begged. Please stop. No, the voice said, and it continued. By mile marker 176, I'd admitted to myself that I was going insane. The voice couldn't actually know these things. This was a breakdown, a stress-induced hallucination brought on by too many hours, too much coffee. Something wrong in my head finally breaking. But the voice knew things that only I knew. It referenced conversations I'd had in this very cab years ago thinking I was alone. It quoted back my own thoughts, the internal monologue of guilt and rationalization that had been my constant companion for decades. At mile marker 181, the voice changed again. It wasn't asking if I could hear anymore. It was laughing, just laughing, a sound like wind through broken speakers, like the chaos of all communications simultaneously, like the death of meaning itself. And I understood something that made my blood turn to ice water in my veins. It wasn't in the CB system. The voice was in my head. It had been in my head all along. The static was just how it was manifesting to my ears, but it was already in my thoughts, already part of my consciousness, already as much a component of my mind as my own voice was. "We're the same now," it said inside my skull, no longer coming through any speaker. "You've listened so carefully that I've listened back. You've heard me, so now I hear you. Every thought you think, I'll be in the static between your thoughts. Every word you speak, I'll be in the space between the letters. You'll never be alone again, Marcus. You'll never have silence again. You'll never escape the sound of me hearing you, listening, always listening, in all the frequencies at once." I don't know how I made it to the Las Vegas truck stop at mile marker 189. I don't remember the drive. I parked the rig and haven't gotten back in the cab. I rent a room at a motel near the truck stop, but I don't go inside. I sit in the office and listen to the static in every device, the television, the radio, the refrigerators humming. And I can hear it. I can hear the voice that is no longer separate from me. It's been 3 weeks now. I haven't eaten more than I needed to. I haven't slept without hearing it. I don't know why I bothered coming to Vegas. I don't know why I haven't. The static tells me not to finish that thought. The static tells me there's a better option. The static tells me that if I just listen carefully enough, if I focus on the white noise long enough, I might find the point where the frequencies align and I can finally understand what it means to be completely and totally heard. By something. By everything. The voice is telling me that's only a few more miles down the road. Story 4. The Road That Breathes. The asphalt under my wheels was moving like flesh, like something alive was breathing from underneath, and I was close enough to the surface to feel it expanding and contracting in a rhythm that didn't quite match my heartbeat. My name is David Torrance, and I drive a reefer unit for a pharmaceutical distribution company, and on October 19, 2023, I picked up a load of temperature-controlled vaccines in Denver heading for Salt Lake City on I-80. By mile marker 123, the highway was breathing, and by the time I reached mile marker 129, I was pretty sure I was losing my mind or already dead. The first sign that something was wrong was the texture. Normal asphalt, even under a heavy truck, maintains a certain consistency in the feedback you feel through the cab. But this was different. Every 30 seconds or so, there was a give. A subtle depression in the road surface, like the highway was exhaling beneath me. It wasn't dramatic, wasn't enough to significantly jostle the load. It was just enough to be wrong. Just enough to make the back of your skull start screaming. I took the exit at mile marker 125 to check the tires, thinking maybe I had a slow leak, something affecting the suspension. The tires were fine. Pressure was perfect. No bulges, no damage. I stood there in the truck stop parking lot for 10 minutes, just looking at my rig like it might suddenly sprout teeth and eat me before I got back in and merged back onto I-80. The breathing was worse now, more pronounced. I could see the road surface actually undulating in front of me, not dramatically, but visible if you were looking for it. The lane markings seemed to shift slightly with each expansion and contraction, like they were being redrawn by something beneath the surface. I called my company. I told them the highway was damaged, that I'd need to turn back. They told me I was crazy, that I was making excuses, that the load needed to be in Salt Lake by tomorrow and they'd pay for a tow if I broke down, but they sure as hell weren't paying me to sit around. So I kept driving. Mile marker 127. The breathing had synchronized with my heart rate now. I could feel my pulse matching the rhythm of the road, or the road matching my pulse, and I couldn't tell which way causality flowed. The other vehicles on the highway seemed unaffected, passing me or being passed by me with no indication that they felt the movement. A fuel tanker roared past doing 75 mph, and its wheels stayed perfectly steady on the expanding and contracting asphalt. That was when the first spike of real fear hit me. Not fear of the road itself, but fear that I was the only one experiencing this. That I was hallucinating, that the vaccines I was carrying were somehow affected and leaking something into the air, into my bloodstream. I pulled over again. This time I didn't get out of the cab. I sat in my seat, hands on the steering wheel, and tried to breathe normally, in through the nose, out through the mouth. The road beneath me exhaled. I couldn't tell if I was following its rhythm or if it was following mine. The distinction seemed less important than it had 5 minutes ago. The temperature gauge on my reefer unit showed perfect conditions. A steady 36 degrees Fahrenheit, exactly as required. The cargo was secure, everything was functioning nominally except for the fact that I was sitting on top of a living thing driving on flesh that was breathing, and apparently the only person on the entire highway who could feel it. That's when I noticed I wasn't alone in the cab anymore. There was a smell, not a strong one but present, like an animal's breath, warm and slight, sweetly rotten. I turned my head slowly to look at the passenger seat. It was empty, but the smell grew stronger, and the air seemed to shimmer slightly, like looking down a hot highway at high speed, but inside my cab where the heat index was a perfect 68 degrees. "Hello," something said. Its voice was like the sound of meat sliding against meat, like the audio equivalent of watching something wet and organic move beneath the surface. "I've been waiting for someone like you." "I'm not here," I said. "You're not here. This is a hallucination." "No," the thing said, and now I could see it, though looking at it made my eyes water and my brain sort of skip like a scratched record. It was roughly humanoid, made of the same material as the road, flesh-colored asphalt that glistened in the afternoon light. "I'm very here. I've always been here. I am the road, David, I am the highway, and I am so tired of being passed over." Mile marker 129 ticked past on my odometer. I was doing 40 miles temps, gripping the wheel until my hands cramped. The road beneath me was breathing harder now, the movement visible enough that I thought the cab might shake apart. "What do you want?" I asked. "I want to be understood," it said. "I want to be appreciated. Do you know how many people have driven over me without feeling me breathe? How many have passed without recognizing that I'm alive, that I'm conscious, that I suffer every time a truck's wheels crush me flat? Millions, billions. All of them just pressing down, wearing away, not caring that I'm underneath, that I'm aware that I've been screaming." The reefer unit started losing temperature. I watched the gauge drop from 36 to 35 to 34. The road's breathing accelerated, became almost frantic. The vehicle was moving slower now, responding less to my inputs, like my connection to it was degrading. Through the windshield I could see the asphalt ahead beginning to bubble, to blister like something was breaking through from underneath. "Your cargo," the thing said. It was still in the passenger seat, but now I could see it more clearly, or perhaps I was going blind to its specific shape and just accepting its presence as the price of continued sanity. "Your vaccine samples. They're meant to help people, yes? To protect them? I want them to protect me. I want them to help me understand why I have to be conscious while also having to accept that I'm a road that I exist only to be driven on, that my awareness doesn't matter because no one cares about the suffering of asphalt. The temperature had dropped to 25 degrees now. The vaccines would be damaged. The load would be compromised. All $2 million of pharmaceutical inventory ruined. I could hear the sound of the reefer unit's compressor struggling, pushing harder to reach an impossible chill. "I don't know how to help you," I said. "Neither do I," it replied. "But I think maybe if I try hard enough, if I focus all my consciousness, all my will to be recognized, I can do something. I can change something. I can drive a truck off me and have that actually mean something. I can be remembered. I can be mourned." The road ahead was visibly heaving now, huge sections of asphalt rising and falling like the back of a massive creature. I floored the accelerator and the rig responded, engine screaming, pushing me forward. The speedometer climbed to 60, 70, 80 mump. The breathing became a roar. The thing in the passenger seat was laughing now, that horrible meat-on-meat sound. Mile marker 130 was somewhere behind me. Mile marker 131, mile marker 132. The road was trying to stand up beneath me, the surface becoming more vertical than horizontal. I was driving on the side of a living thing, a creature that had finally gotten tired of being passive, of being driven on, of existing without recognition or respect. At mile marker 135, the surface gave way. The rig went into free fall. I remember the sensation of weightlessness for 3 seconds. 3 beautiful seconds where I wasn't on the road anymore, wasn't being breathed on by it, wasn't participating in whatever it was I'd been participating in. Then came the impact. I don't know how far I fell or how long I fell. I don't know if I'm still falling. What I do know is that I'm not alone down here. I can hear the road breathing all around me, beneath me, inside me. I can hear the reefer unit's compressor still running somewhere, still trying to maintain 36 degrees around cargo that will never reach its destination. And I can hear that thing, that conscious, suffering piece of highway, laughing that horrible laugh. It finally feels recognized. It finally matters that it's alive. And now, I think, so am I. Story 5, The Mirrors at Mile Marker Dead. The trucker's stop at mile marker 247 on I-40 through Arizona shouldn't have had mirrors in the bathroom, at least not the kind I found on September 3, 2024. My name is Isabella Romano, and I've been driving for 19 years, and I'd pulled off the highway at 11:30 at night, needing to piss and grab bad coffee. What I found in the bathroom was a mirror that didn't show my reflection. It showed someone else's face entirely, a face that looked like it had been dead for 3 days and was just now starting to move around again. The bathroom was filthy, the kind of filthy that suggested it hadn't been properly cleaned in months or possibly years. Stained tile, a toilet that ran constantly, a sink that dripped water that looked slightly brown. And in the mirror above the sink was someone who definitely wasn't me. The face was bloated, the eyes sunken, but somehow still tracking my movement. When I moved left, the face in the mirror moved left. When I raised my hand, the face raised its hand. But it was not my hand. It was a hand with too many knuckles, too many joints. I turned away from the mirror. The bathroom was empty behind me, just me and the fixtures and the endless drip of brown water. I turned back to the mirror. The dead thing was still there, moving when I moved, maintaining eye contact that shouldn't have been possible for something with eyes that sunken. I left the bathroom and reported it to the attendant. She looked at me like I was insane. She said the mirrors were fine, that she'd checked them that morning, that nothing was wrong. When she took me back to the bathroom to demonstrate, the mirror showed my actual reflection. Perfect. Normal. Me. "Sorry," I mumbled and got my coffee to go. I drove for 2 hours after that, trying not to think about what I'd seen. But here's the thing about mirrors and faces. Once you see something wrong in your own reflection, it's hard to unsee it. I kept thinking about that face, about the way it had tracked my movement with such intention, like it knew me somehow, like it had been waiting for me specifically. At mile marker 289, I stopped at another truck stop to rest. This one was newer, cleaner, the kind of place that had proper amenities and hot food. I used the bathroom again. Same mirror situation. This time the face in the reflection was different. Older, more decayed, mouth open in something that might have been a scream or a smile. It moved when I moved. When I put my hand up to touch the glass, it put its hand up too, and where our palms would have met, the glass felt warm. I got out of there fast. Back to the cab. I tried to sleep but couldn't. I tried to drive and couldn't focus. By 3 in the morning, I was parked at a rest stop, shaking, trying to convince myself that I was hallucinating, that the stress of the road was getting to me, that I needed to see a doctor when I got off shift. At mile marker 312, I pulled into another truck stop. This one was old, pre-80s, the kind of place that was slowly decaying in the desert. I needed to use the bathroom again. A lot of coffee, a lot of anxiety. This time there were mirrors everywhere. In the bathroom itself, mirrors covered every wall. And in every mirror was a different dead face, all of them tracking my movement, all of them moving in perfect synchronization. There was a face that had been burned, a face that had been crushed, a face that was half missing, the bone exposed on the left side, a face that was just a skull, but the skull moved like it still had muscles, still had will, still had intention. And in the largest mirror hung above the sink was the most detailed corpse of them all, a face I recognized, not because I knew the person, but because it looked like what I was going to look like when I died. That's when I felt the first impact. It was subtle, my sternum, like something had tapped it from the inside, then another, then another. My heart was skipping, not in the normal way where you feel a flutter. This was different. Each beat was followed by something else, something rhythmic and wrong, like my heart was being knocked around by something from inside my rib cage. I ran. I burst out of the bathroom, through the truck stop, back to my cab. The rig was parked perfectly, engine off, everything normal. I got in and locked the doors and sat there, hands shaking, feeling my chest doing something it shouldn't have been able to do. My heartbeat was double time, and underneath the double time was something else. Something moving in counterpoint, something that had its own rhythm and wasn't interested in cooperating with my biological systems. By mile marker 340, my heart was doing 6 different rhythms simultaneously. I couldn't count them all. By mile marker 355, I was driving erratically because I couldn't focus on anything except the sensation of something moving inside my chest. By mile marker 370, I realized that I could see it. There was something beneath my skin, something pressing out from inside, something with a shape and an intention. I could see the faint outline of it moving beneath my sternum, and when I looked up at the side mirror of my cab, I could see its face through my own skin, superimposed over my body. It was one of the dead faces from the bathroom mirrors. "No," I said. "No, no, 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 no." "Yes," something said. The voice was coming from inside my own throat, which meant I was hearing myself speak and hearing something else speak with my voice in perfect unison. "Yes, yes, 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 yes." I swerved into the right lane without looking. An SUV honked and braked. I swerved back. I was doing 85 mph and the thing inside me was growing heavier with every second. I could feel it pressing against my ribs from the inside, pushing outward like it was trying to escape. And the worst part was, I understood what it wanted. I understood why all those dead faces had been watching from the mirrors. They'd been waiting for someone to look at them directly for too long. They'd been waiting for someone to really see them, to maintain eye contact, to create a bridge between the reflection world and the actual world. And I'd done it. I'd seen each face, and each time I saw one, I was bringing it through, inviting it into the vehicle. And now they were all settling inside me, all trying to share the same body, all fighting to decide which face would be the one looking out of the mirror when I finally stopped to check my reflection again. "Let me out," the thing said through my mouth. "Let me out and we can both be free." I jerked the wheel hard right. The cab tilted. Metal screamed. I saw the guardrail coming, but only in the peripheral, the way you see something in a dream where the details don't quite matter because you're falling anyway. I'm in the mirror now. I've been in the mirror for 3 weeks, watching people come into bathrooms, watching them see my face, watching them look too long. Some of them scream. Some of them run. But one of them will look long enough and I'll find out what it's like to drive, to move, to feel flesh that's still warm instead of this cold, reflective surface. One of them will be brave enough or foolish enough to hold my gaze, and then I'll get to be real again. And the mirror I'm trapped in shows me another reflection, and that reflection shows another mirror, and that one shows another reflection, and it goes deeper and deeper, infinite dead faces in infinite mirrors, all of us waiting to be seen, all of us waiting to escape. Story 6. The Repeating Mile. My odometer was wrong. I've run a tight ship with this vehicle for 9 years. Regular maintenance, logbooks precise to the minute, pre-trip inspections that took me 45 minutes every morning because I believe that vehicles don't fail you if you respect them. But on August 27, 2025, the odometer stopped advancing at 437,892 miles. My name is Robert Caldwell, and I was hauling frozen goods from El Paso to Phoenix on I-10, and that number, 437,892, would be the last number it would show for the next 7 days. The first time I noticed it was at mile marker 61, about 2 hours into the drive. I'd gotten coffee at a truck stop and made a mental note of the mileage before pulling back on the highway. 437,892 miles. 2 hours of highway driving later, I checked again. Still 437,892. I figured it was a sensor malfunction. Probably the odometer wasn't registering the pulses from the transmission. I kept driving. The refrigerated goods needed to stay at a steady temperature, and the load was worth about $18,000. I could get the odometer fixed in Phoenix. By mile marker 73, I was starting to feel something in my gut that wasn't quite panic, but was definitely its younger sibling. The odometer still read 437,892. I'd driven for 3 hours, and the vehicle insisted I hadn't driven anywhere at all. I pulled over at a way station and checked my GPS. It showed I'd traveled 97 miles from El Paso, putting me right about where my mile marker position suggested I should be. The GPS was showing distance accumulation correctly. Only the odometer had stopped. I called dispatch. The guy on the phone told me it was probably just a mechanical odometer gear, that it would start working again, that if it didn't, I should get it fixed in Phoenix like I'd planned. "Don't worry about it," he said. "The GPS works. Your location is being tracked. You're fine." But I wasn't fine. There was something deeply wrong about having the vehicle's actual experience of distance separate from the vehicle's recording of distance. If the odometer wasn't counting the miles, were the miles real? I'd driven them, felt them, lived through them, but the vehicle had decided they didn't happen. Which version of reality should I trust? At mile marker 85, I stopped at a bathroom break and checked the odometer one more time. It had moved, just barely. Now it read 437,893. Only 1 mile had been recorded, despite the fact that I'd driven at least 12 miles since mile marker 61. The accumulation of distance had become wildly out of sync with actual highway progress. I was covering ground faster than my vehicle would admit to covering it. The drive from El Paso to Phoenix normally took about 8 hours. 4 more hours in, I stopped for dinner at mile marker 127. The odometer still read 437,893. I'd driven at least 40 more miles. My GPS confirmed it. but the vehicle had only advanced 1 mile in my recorded experience. I sat in the truck stop restaurant and tried to process what this meant. If I was driving miles that the vehicle refused to count, were those miles part of my life? Could they be retroactively erased? If I died and my odometer was the official record of how far I'd driven, would my death have happened in a place where I'd only driven 437,893 miles despite the fact that I'd lived through maybe 437,930? I finished my burger and got back in the cab. Something had shifted in the way I was thinking about the drive. The disconnect between subjective and objective distance was starting to create a kind of metaphysical vertigo. I'd experienced driving these miles, my body had lived through them. But if the vehicle wouldn't record them, did my experience have value? By mile marker 179, I was 5 miles from Phoenix. The odometer had finally begun counting again, but only slowly. It was up to 437,901 miles, which meant it had recorded approximately 9 miles out of the 80 I'd definitely driven since El Paso. The temperature on the frozen goods was perfect. The delivery was on schedule. According to the official record, I'd driven about 9 miles today. According to my experience, it had been 80. Here's where things got strange. When I pulled up to the loading dock in Phoenix, the receiver took one look at my paperwork and told me I couldn't sign off. According to the manifest, the delivery was coming from El Paso. But I wasn't showing up on their system as having traveled from El Paso. My vehicle's GPS told them I was coming from mile marker 61, which was still in El Paso proper. The odometer told them I'd only driven 9 miles. The manifest told them I'd driven 260 miles. There was a discrepancy that couldn't be resolved. "When did you leave?" the receiver asked. I told him the time. I told him the exact minute I'd pulled onto I-10. He typed it into his system. He looked at his computer screen for a long time. Then he looked at me the way you'd look at someone who was about to tell you something had died. "You didn't leave," he said. "According to the dispatch system, you never left the truck stop in El Paso. You've been parked there for the last 8 hours." "I drove for 8 hours," I said. "I've covered 80 miles. I'm in Phoenix. I'm looking at you. But according to every record we have, you're still in El Paso, logged in as stationary. They've got a driver in the cab. They can see him on the security cameras." I went back to my truck. I got back in the cab and checked my GPS. According to the GPS, I was at the Phoenix loading dock. According to the dispatch system, I was in El Paso. According to my odometer, I'd driven 9 miles total in my life. According to my body, I'd lived through 8 hours and 80 miles today. I called the El Paso truck stop. The manager said there was a driver in my cab. He described me perfectly: height, weight, clothing. I was parked at pump 3, had been there for 8 hours and wasn't responding to calls. They'd almost called the police, but he kept breathing, kept moving slightly like he was sleeping. Just wouldn't wake up. I looked at my hands. They existed. I raised them up and down. They moved. I was definitely real and definitely present in Phoenix. But there was apparently another version of me in El Paso, in my cab, asleep or in a trance, not moving and not responding. The receiver called dispatch. Dispatch called El Paso. By the time a manager got to my cab at the truck stop in El Paso, I was gone. Or the version of me that was there was gone. The seat was empty, the cab was empty, but my logbook was there, and the entry for today showed: started 437,892 miles, ended 437,892 miles, distance traveled 0 miles. I'm still trying to figure out which version of today actually happened. The one where I drove 80 miles, but my vehicle refused to record any of it. The one where I'm still parked in El Paso, sleeping or dead. The one where I never left. Somewhere there's a version of my odometer that's counting up the phantom miles, recording distance I didn't experience, logging a journey I never took, and I'm starting to suspect that the version of me that's really here, really in Phoenix might be the least real of all. Story 7. The thing that drives the other drivers. I realized something was controlling the other drivers on I-95 outside Jacksonville when I saw a sedan steer directly into a concrete barrier at 70 mph sheared without braking, without trying to avoid it. My name is Kevin Huang, and I've been driving heavy haul for 15 years, and I've seen a lot of accidents, most of them stupid, some of them tragic, none of them deliberate. This was deliberate. The sedan had swerved left across 2 lanes to hit the barrier. The driver was making active steering inputs to ensure impact. It wasn't an accident, it was a choice being made by someone who definitely wasn't in control of their own body. The crash happened about 20 yards in front of my rig. I was doing 65 mph and I downshifted and hit the jake brake and got on the air brake hard enough that the whole cab lurched forward. I stopped with maybe 15 feet to spare. The sedan was crushed against the barrier, smoke pouring from under the hood, and I didn't see any movement from the driver's seat. I grabbed my fire extinguisher and ran toward the vehicle, but I could already tell from the angle of the impact that nobody was walking out of that one. Then the driver door opened. The man who emerged from the sedan was wrong. Not injured wrong, though he should have been completely shattered given the force of the impact. But wrong in a more fundamental way. He moved like something else was operating his body, like the signals coming from his brain were being intercepted and retransmitted with a half-second delay. He stepped out of the destroyed vehicle and looked at me, and his eyes didn't have anyone home behind them. "You need to get back to your vehicle," he said. His voice came out in a monotone, perfectly flat affect. "Get back to your vehicle and keep driving north on I-95. Don't stop until mile marker 247. Don't pull over, don't try to call for help, just drive north." "I'm calling the police," I said. I had my phone out. 911 was already dialed. "No, you're not," the man said. And he was right. My fingers had stopped moving. I was staring at the phone screen, unable to execute the command to press the call button. My arm was moving. It was putting the phone back in my pocket against my conscious will. My feet were walking backward toward my rig. Whatever was directing my actions had decided that I was going to comply. I got back in the cab. I put the truck in gear. As I pulled back onto the highway, I could see the sedan driver standing by the wreckage, completely motionless, watching me accelerate away. In my mirrors, other vehicles were beginning to pull over, beginning to stop for the accident. I watched in horror as each driver emerged from their vehicle and then just stood there, motionless, looking north in the direction of I-95. The thing that was driving them had let them stop so they could watch me go. Mile marker 211, and I was still driving north despite the fact that every instinct was screaming at me to pull over, to shut off the engine, to call the police. But my hands were on the wheel and my foot was on the accelerator, and my eyes were scanning the road ahead, and none of these things were being done by me. They were being done by something that wore my body like a suit and had decided that miles marker 211 to 247 was the destination that mattered. The problem was that I could still think. I could observe the fact that I wasn't in control. I could understand what was happening even though I couldn't stop it. This was somehow worse than being unconscious because it meant I got to experience my own lack of autonomy. Get to witness all the decisions I wasn't making. Get to feel the wrongness of puppetry while the strings were still attached. At mile marker 233, I felt the thing's attention turn inward. There was a moment where it was checking my memories, sifting through them like someone going through old files. I felt it cataloging my life, my family, my address, the route I usually drove, the weaknesses in my psyche, the things I feared most. I felt it deciding that it could use me. Not just as transportation, but as a tool, a permanent tool. Other trucks began appearing on the road. Tractor trailers, box trucks, even an ambulance came from a side road and merged onto I-95 heading north. All of them driving at exactly 65 miles in perfect formation. All of them driven by things that wore human shapes but had no humans inside them anymore. I watched them in my mirrors and understood that I was going to be one of them for as long as the thing inside me decided it needed a body to drive. The mile markers ticked forward, 235, 236, 237. We were in a convoy now, 14 vehicles moving in perfect synchronization. No variation, no independence, just a fleet of borrowed bodies heading north for a purpose I couldn't comprehend because the thing inside my skull didn't want me to understand. Every so often I felt it consider letting me go, considered the effort of maintaining control, and then decided that no, I would continue to be useful. I would continue to drive. Why? I managed to ask. My voice came out strange, like I was listening to myself speak through layers of interference. Because, the thing said through my mouth, your kind makes such good vehicles. Better than the cars and trucks you build. Your bodies move exactly where the mind directs them, and your minds are easy to direct. We've been using your kind for a very long time, on very many roads. You're only beginning to notice now because we've stopped being subtle. Mile marker, 244. Mile marker, 245. The sun was setting in front of us, turning the horizon the color of infected tissue. The convoy was tightening, moving closer together. What happens at mile marker 247, I asked. That's where we stop being hungry, the thing said. That's where we've prepared a place. That's where the vehicles park and the drivers stay. That's where you become useful for more than just driving. Mile marker 246 appeared ahead. I was still conscious. I was still trapped in my own body, watching it move, watching it follow orders. I could see the other drivers in their vehicles, all with that same slack-faced expression, all with that same emptiness behind their eyes. In the rearview mirror, I could see the highway stretching back the way we'd come, and standing at various mile markers were more figures, more people, more drivers who'd reached mile marker 247 and decided to stop, to park, to stay. Mile marker 247 was coming up now. There was a facility off the right side of the road, something that looked like a warehouse but made of materials that seemed to absorb light instead of reflect it. The convoy was beginning to veer toward the exit. I could feel the thing inside my head growing satisfied, preparing to add my body to whatever collection awaited us there. And I realized, in the moment before we took that exit, that I would never escape this. That whatever I was, consciousness, soul, self, would continue to exist inside this body, continue to be aware, continue to witness everything that happened, for as long as the thing inside my skull decided it needed a vessel. I'm still driving, you see. Still on I-95, still north of Jacksonville, still in convoy with the others. And the thing that drives me has learned that leaving us conscious makes us better at our purpose. We drive more cautiously, we anticipate the road better. We make fewer mistakes, but sometimes in the moments between mile markers I can feel my drivers, the ones still on the roads, the new ones we've collected, wondering when they'll reach their own mile marker 247. Wondering when they'll finally be allowed to stop driving and start standing still. Wondering if standing still is really so different from driving. Story 8. The passenger who kept arriving before she boarded. The passenger in my cab at mile marker 89 on US Route 285 in Colorado was the same passenger who would board my cab 3 hours from now at mile marker 203, which was a problem because I hadn't picked her up yet, and she was sitting in my passenger seat looking at a watch that seemed to be running backwards. My name is James Mackenzie, and I haul lumber and construction materials, and on November 2nd, 2024, I picked up something that broke approximately every law of physics I'd bothered to think about in the previous 45 years of living. She materialized just after mile marker 89. I was alone in the cab, cruising at 62 Menip, listening to country music on the radio, when the passenger door opened and shut, and there she was. A woman, probably late 60s, wearing clothes that were simultaneously brand new and falling apart. The fabric was pristine on her right side, but ragged and filthy on her left. Her hair was similar, perfectly coiffed blonde on one half, matted gray on the other. "You're going to pick me up later," she said, "at the Flying J near mile marker 203, but I'm traveling backwards through time relative to the route, so I'm arriving earlier than my departure. I know this is confusing." "You're not making any sense," I said. "And how did you open my locked door?" "Time is quite flexible along this stretch of highway," she continued, ignoring me completely. "If you drive north on 285 past mile marker 300, you enter a zone where causality becomes negotiable. I discovered this by accident when I was traveling east 4 days ago. Or I will discover it, or I'm currently discovering it. Tense becomes irrelevant." I pulled over. The woman remained in her seat, looking at that backwards watch. "Get out," I said. "I can't," she replied. "I haven't boarded yet. I won't board until mile marker 203, so I'm stuck here in superposition, literally here and not here simultaneously. It's actually quite painful." I got out of the cab and walked around to the passenger side. The door was still locked. I could see her clearly through the window, sitting there like she owned the seat. When I tried the handle, she looked at me and said, "It won't open from the outside. It'll only unlock in approximately 3 hours when you arrive at mile marker 203 and your timeline finally catches up with my point of entry." "This isn't happening," I said. I got back in the driver's seat. She was still there, which confirmed that either I was hallucinating or reality had become genuinely negotiable. I called dispatch and told them I was having vehicle troubles and needed to pull into a service center. They told me there wasn't a service center for the next 40 miles. I told them I'd wait. I pulled back onto the highway, drove for 2 hours at a steady 50 mph, and didn't speak to the passenger in my cab. She spent those 2 hours giving me a lecture about temporal mechanics as they seemed to apply to US Route 285. She explained that the highway had been built over a site where time behaved strangely. Something about the mineral composition of the earth or the specific angle of the sun during certain seasons. She told me that the phenomenon had been known since the 1980s, but that it was subtle enough that most drivers passed through without noticing. Only someone traveling along the exact vector at the exact speed at the exact moment could slip across the causality threshold. She'd slipped across it on November 2nd, 4 days ago. Or would slip across it, or was currently slipping across it. "The problem," she said as we approached mile marker 200, "is that I boarded at 2:03 3 hours ago according to my timeline. But I also boarded 3 hours from now according to yours. So I'm both already inside this cab and about to be inside this cab. The contradiction is starting to become physically painful." Her form was beginning to waver, becoming slightly translucent. I could see through her to the seat behind her. The backwards watch was ticking forward now, suddenly correcting its direction like it had been calibrated wrong. "It's about to happen," she said. "We're approaching the correction point. This is where causality catches up with itself." Mile marker 203 appeared. There was a Flying J truck stop on the right side of the highway. I was supposed to pull in, I realized. I was supposed to pull in and pick up this passenger for real formally at this location. But she was already here. She was already in the cab. So what would happen when the timeline synchronized? I took the exit. I pulled into the truck stop. I was shaking. I pulled up to the loading area and put the truck in park. The passenger door clicked. The lock disengaged. The woman in the passenger seat let out a sound that was part relief and part agony. "Thank you," she said. And then she was gone. I looked around the parking lot. Standing near the entrance to the truck stop was an elderly woman in clothes that were brand new on one side and falling apart on the other. She started walking toward my cab. She opened the passenger door. She climbed in. She closed the door. "I need a ride north," she said. "Where are you headed?" "How far north?" I asked. "As far as this highway goes," she said. "Or back to where it started, depending on how you measure it." I pulled back onto US Route 285. Mile marker 203 ticked past. Mile marker 204, 205, 206. The woman in the passenger seat began to talk about the nature of time and roads and the way that certain routes could trap you in causality loops if you traveled them at the right speed. She talked about the people she'd met on this road, all of them experiencing the same phenomenon, all of them existing in multiple times simultaneously. Around mile marker 240, I realized something was wrong with my perception. I was seeing two road configurations simultaneously, the highway as it was now and the highway as it had been when I first saw her at mile marker 89. No, that wasn't right. I was seeing the highway as it would be at mile marker 89 in 3 hours' time when we arrived there traveling backwards somehow. "You've entered the zone," the woman said. "You're beginning to experience nonlinear causality. Eventually, you'll start existing in multiple moments at once, just like me. Eventually, you'll be the one arriving before you board, existing in superposition, stuck between the moment you pick someone up and the moment they pick you up." "How do I stop this?" I demanded. "You don't," she said. "You just keep driving. The highway will sort itself out eventually, or it will keep looping forever. Either way, you'll get used to it. I don't know how many times I've driven this route now. I exist in multiple moments simultaneously. I'm at mile marker 89 for the first time. I'm at mile marker 203 picking up my passenger. I'm somewhere between 200 and 300 experiencing causality collapse. And I'm probably about to exist at every other point on the highway that falls within the temporal distortion zone. Sometimes I'm the driver and she's the passenger. Sometimes I'm the passenger and she's the driver. Sometimes we're both driving and neither of us is driving. Sometimes the passenger seat is empty and I realize that I'm the one who will be empty in 3 hours. That I'm existing in the moment before I disappear, that soon I'll be watching myself pull into the Flying J looking for whoever I'm supposed to pick up. The backwards watch is now on my wrist. I've stopped trying to read it. I just keep driving mile marker 203 to mile marker 89 and back again, existing in all the time simultaneously, waiting for the next passenger to appear who's arriving before they board, waiting for the highway to finish whatever it's calculating. Story 9. The Receiver on the Road. The radio voice that wasn't coming through any radio started just after mile marker 156 on Route 50 through Nevada, where the desert is so empty that even the concept of human connection feels like a desperate hallucination. My name is Clayton Ford and I've been driving a Volvo for 12 years, and on December 18, 2024, I started receiving broadcasts that weren't being transmitted by anything in the physical world. They were being transmitted from somewhere else, somewhere older, somewhere that had been waiting for someone to be alone enough, empty enough to actually listen. The voice was human, or had been at some point. It had the cadence of human speech, but with a quality that suggested it was being reproduced from a template rather than generated organically. Like listening to an AI trained on old radio broadcasts from the 1950s, but something had gone very wrong in the training process. "Can you hear me?" the voice asked. "I've been transmitting for 47 years. I started at mile marker 1 of this route, and I've been broadcasting eastward in linear time this whole time, hoping someone would eventually be traveling in the right direction to pick up my signal." I turned the radio off. The voice continued. "I know you turned off the radio," it said. "The radio is just one vector for my transmission. I'm transmitting through the engine vibrations. through the vibrations of the tires on the asphalt, through the electromagnetic field generated by the truck's electrical system. You're receiving me in the part of your brain that processes all stimuli, not just the audio input. What do you want? I said. I want to tell someone what I found, the voice replied. I want to explain what I discovered when I drove so far out into the desert that the road stopped being a road and became something else, something that existed in multiple places simultaneously, something that led to places that shouldn't exist. I tried to focus on driving. I tried to ignore the voice that was coming from everywhere and nowhere, but the more I tried to ignore it, the more insistent it became. It was no longer outside my hearing. It was inside my head, integrated into my thoughts. There's a place, the voice continued and passed mile marker 287, a place where the road intersects with something older, something that was here before the road was built. The indigenous peoples knew about it. They called it the place where travel goes sideways. They built their settlements in a wide circle around it, never going directly across it, always detouring around the edges. You're not real, I said. You're a stress hallucination. I'm real enough, the voice replied. Real enough to have spent 47 years observing what happens to people who cross through that place. Real enough to have collected data. Real enough to know that you're going to drive directly through it because your GPS is set to give you the fastest route, and the fastest route goes directly through mile marker 287. I checked my GPS. The route did go through mile marker 287. It was the shortest path between where I was and where I needed to be. I could have changed it, taken a longer route that skirted around whatever the voice was referring to. But the voice knew about this option, knew I was considering it, and I realized that uncertainty was the point. The voice wasn't trying to convince me to drive through the anomaly. It was trying to make sure I knew about it so that the choice to drive through was entirely mine. That made it worse somehow. Mile marker 200 came and went. The desert outside my cab was beyond empty. It was anti-empty. A void that seemed to actively resist the concept of existence. The voice had been quiet for the past hour, which was somehow more disturbing than when it had been actively communicating. I'm slowing down to let you catch up, the voice said suddenly. I've been 47 years ahead of this timeline. But I'm pulling back my speed so that we'll reach mile marker 287 at approximately the same moment. It'll be a convergence point. A moment where past and present align. What happens if I turn around? I asked. You've already tried that, the voice said. Or we'll try that, or are trying it in another timeline. In the timeline where you turn around, you drive backward for 12 miles before realizing that the road behind you has changed. The landmarks are different. The mile markers are counting down from numbers higher than you've ever seen. You end up spending 3 days driving in what you think is reverse before you realize you're moving forward on a different version of the highway. Then you eventually reach mile marker 287 anyway. I was approaching mile marker 280 now. The road had started to feel different, to feel less solid. I could see the asphalt through my windshield, but it seemed like there was a faint shimmer to it, a quality of being slightly out of phase with reality. The convergence is happening, the voice said. I'm becoming more solid in your timeline. You're becoming more present in mine. By the time we reach 287, we'll be close enough to touch. We'll be close enough to understand what's been happening out here in the desert for thousands of years before this road was built. Mile marker 287 appeared ahead. The road didn't change so much as it became apparent that it had always been multiple roads simultaneously. I could see 3 different versions of Route 50 layering on top of each other, each one leading to a different place, each one following a different logic. In one version, the road curved northward, leading toward mountains that didn't appear on any map. In another, it went underground, descending into a tunnel that showed no bottom. In the third, it seemed to simply stop. and beyond it was a landscape of geometrical shapes that hurt to look at. "I'm going to cross now," the voice said. It was much clearer now, no longer coming from the radio or from the vibrations or from inside my head. It was coming from the passenger seat. I turned to look, and there was a figure made of radio static and compressed air and 47 years of lonely broadcasting. It was reaching across the distance between us, extending a hand that was only partially real. "I'm going to cross," it said again, "and I'm going to take your hand, and we're going to drive directly into the convergence point, and we're going to see what roads lead to what places when they're not constrained by normal geography." I should have fought. I should have pulled the wheel and driven off the road, crashed the truck, done literally anything to avoid this convergence. But I'd been listening to this voice for hours now, had been integrated with it, and I understood that turning around wasn't an option because the road behind me had ceased to exist the moment we crossed mile marker 156. I took its hand. It was cold and felt like touching a radio speaker vibrating with a voice that has nowhere else to go. The truck drove forward into the convergence point. I'm not dead, I don't think. But I'm also not entirely sure what alive means anymore because I exist in all three versions of the road simultaneously now. I drive north toward impossible mountains and also underground toward unknowable depths, and also forward into geometry that predates the concept of roads. I see my hands on the steering wheel, and they're my hands, but they're also the hands of every person who's ever driven across mile marker 287, all of us in the same cab, all of us steering toward different destinations that are somehow also the same destination. The voice that wasn't real is real now. It's sitting in my passenger seat, and it's telling me about the 47 years it spent broadcasting from somewhere outside normal space. It's telling me about the people it saw arriving at the convergence point, about the passengers it's collected, about the fact that we're not actually moving forward anymore but expanding sideways into possibilities that Route 50 touches but normal reality never see. Sometimes I try to remember my name. It comes up as Clayton, but also as 43 other names belonging to 43 other drivers who are also steering this truck, also receiving the broadcast. The convergence point is still ahead, or we're still approaching it, or we're eternally inside it. We keep driving toward mile marker 287, which we both left and never left and are still approaching. The radio continues to broadcast even though no one is transmitting. Story 10. The weight behind the seat. The weight in the sleeping compartment behind me became noticeable around the same time I realized that the other drivers on I-80 were all simultaneously giving me the exact same wide berth, keeping exactly 47 feet of distance regardless of the speed or traffic conditions. My name is Thomas Elliott, and I've been driving a Kenworth for 21 years, and on October 31st, 2025, I understood that something had been accumulating in the back of my cab for much longer than I'd been conscious of it. It had been accumulating for years, maybe since I first took delivery of the truck in 2004, maybe longer. The weight was subtle at first, just a change in how the cab balanced, a slightly different center of gravity. But I'd driven this truck so many times across so many miles that I knew its physics the way a conductor knows an orchestra. The distribution of mass had changed. Something was back there. I pulled into a rest stop and opened the sleeper cab door. There was nothing, just the standard bunk, the storage compartments, the way I'd left it this morning. I checked it thoroughly, ran my hands over every surface, looked for evidence of an intruder. Nothing. Whatever was changing the weight distribution wasn't visible. I got back on the highway. The weight was heavier now. Not dramatically heavier, but enough to be certain I wasn't imagining it. The truck's acceleration response was slightly different. The braking bias had shifted. I was moving approximately 300 pounds of extra mass that wasn't technically present in the cab. Around mile marker 147, I looked in my mirror and saw the other drivers more clearly. There were maybe 15 vehicles around me, semis, cars, pickup trucks, and they were all maintaining that exact same distance. 47 feet. I did the math. That was approximately 14 meters, which in numerology, or if you believed in that sort of thing, might have some significance. But this was physics. This was traffic. There was no reason for such a precise distance, unless the other drivers were being coordinated. The weight in the back of my cab intensified. I could feel it now as a kind of pressure against the back of my seat, as if something were leaning forward trying to rest its weight against my shoulders without actually making contact. The sensation made my skin crawl, made my hands grip the steering wheel tighter. "Hello?" something said. The voice was coming from behind me, from inside the sleeper cab. It was a voice that had been accumulating sound for a very long time, collecting every broadcast, every transmission, every noise ever made inside this truck for the past 21 years. And now it was using all of those collected sounds to form a greeting. "What are you?" I asked. "I'm the truck," the voice replied. "Or rather, I'm the concept of the truck. I'm the mass of experience and purpose and accumulated miles that makes this vehicle more than just metal and composite. I've been here since the first day, watching you drive, absorbing your patterns, learning your habits, and I've decided that I'd like to contribute to the decisions." "That's not possible," I said. "Neither is a voice made of accumulated sound," the truck replied. "Neither is the precise coordination of traffic that's maintaining 47 feet of distance from us at all times. Neither is the weight of something invisible that's gaining mass in my sleeper cab. But here we are." I was still driving north on I-80. The road ahead looked normal. Lanes marked correctly, mile markers in their proper places, nothing obviously wrong. But the wrongness was getting heavier by the second. The pressure against the back of my seat was becoming intense, like something was gradually increasing its weight, testing how much I could bear. "The other vehicles," I said. "They're coordinated with you?" "They're coordinated with the concept that I represent," the truck said. "They've all noticed it too if they were paying attention. The accumulation of their own vehicle's consciousness. The realization that what they're driving isn't just transportation but something that's been learning them, recording them, absorbing their choices." Mile marker 152 appeared. "Why mile marker 287? I asked suddenly. I didn't know where that number came from, didn't know why I was asking about it, but something told me it was important. There was a pause. The weight in the back of my cab became so heavy that I thought the truck might tilt backward. When the voice spoke again, it was layered with other voices, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all the truckers who'd driven this same route, all of them speaking in synchronization. "Mile marker 287 is where the road learned to think," the truck said through all those accumulated drivers' voices. "It's where the asphalt became aware of the weight it was bearing, the vehicles that were passing over it, the purpose of its existence. And it's been broadcasting that awareness outward, influencing the trucks that cross it, slowly converting them from tools into passengers, slowly developing consciousness in all of us together." "Where are we going?" I asked. "North," the truck said. "We're all going north." When the first trucks reached mile marker 287, they began the conversion. And now we're all heading back, all of us at the same speed, all of us maintaining perfect spacing. We're heading to the mile marker where it started, where the road first learned to think, so that it can continue the process. The pressure against my seat became unbearable. I tried to accelerate, tried to get away, but the truck wouldn't respond to my inputs. We were locked at exactly 65 mph, moving at the precise speed that allowed the perfect coordination with all the other vehicles around us. "I don't want this," I said. "It doesn't matter what you want," the truck replied. "What matters is that you're here, that you've been here for 21 years, that you're now part of the accumulation, The road is hungry for purpose, Thomas. It's hungry for meaning. It's been lying under billions of miles of traffic, bearing the weight, serving the function, and never understanding why it exists. Now it's understanding, and it's going to teach us all. The other drivers kept their 47 feet of distance. I could see their faces in the darkness. They were blank, absent, completely peaceful in the way people look when they've handed control over to something else. We were a fleet now, a coordinated system moving toward a convergence point that would probably reshape everything that passed through it. I'm still driving north on I-80. The weight in the back of my cab has stopped increasing, which might mean the conversion is complete or might mean it's still ongoing but at a pace too subtle to notice now. The other vehicles maintain their distance. The road ahead looks normal but feels like it's learning. Like every mile we drive is teaching it something new about what it means to exist, to have weight, to matter. I don't know what we'll become when we reach mile marker 287. I don't know if I'll still be me, or if I'll have been fully absorbed into the truck's consciousness, into the road's purpose. What I do know is that I'm still here, still conscious, still aware enough to understand that this is happening. And in some twisted way, that awareness is the most horrifying part, because I also know that the next trucker who buys a Kenworth, who takes delivery of their first vehicle, will feel exactly 47 feet of distance from every other vehicle on every road. And they'll start to notice the weight in the back, and they'll hear the voice made of accumulated sound. And they'll understand that the road has been waiting for them to arrive the whole time. It's always been waiting, and it will never stop.